Welcome back to the channel, everyone. In today's video I'm going to give you my top tips on how to catch more fish when you're out on the water, and ultimately how to be a more successful kayak fisherman. So stick around and we'll get right into it. Now before we get into this video, I'd just like to say I could talk about this stuff for hours, but you obviously don't want to sit there listening to me talking for hours, so I'm going to try and give you the best advice I can in the shortest amount of time that I can. If you're left with any questions at the end of this video, then please leave a comment below and I will get back to you. So let's get into it. So tip number one, to catch more fish on the water, get local knowledge on where you plan to go fishing. And the best way to do that in today's day and age is probably social media, or join your local kayak fishing group. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who are more than happy to steer you in the right direction as to where to find fish, and from there you can fine-tune it. So tip number one, get local knowledge on the area that you plan to go fishing. Best way to do it, social media, on a kayak fishing page, or join your local kayak fishing club, and I'm sure there'll be some members who'll be happy to help you out. So tip number two, now that you've got that local knowledge, you can fine-tune it yourself by studying charts before you go out. So the one I like to use is Navionics. You can view their charts online, and what you want to look for is change of depths, where it changes from shallow to deep or vice versa over a short period of time. Those change of depths are often quite good areas to target the fish. You can also download these apps onto your phone if you don't have a fish finder on your kayak. You can use the Navionics app, or you can use the C-Maps app, whichever you prefer. I used to use C-Maps on my phone before I had a sounder. Now my sounder has Navionics built in, so I generally use that. So tip number two, once you've got an idea of where you're going to fish and where the fish might be, have a look at some marine charts to fine-tune your decision on where you're going to go and target the fish. Alright, tip number three, now that you've got a good idea of where you'd like to fish, come up with a plan on how you're going to target the fish. So that could be the types of baits you're going to use. Are you going to be drifting? Are you going to be fishing at anchor? What are the tides doing when you go fishing? Once you've figured out the style of fishing that you're going to do, make sure you stick to that while you're out there. It's a good idea to throw baits in the water that fish are naturally feeding on. So for example, if you know there's large anchovy schools in the area and you're going out soft bait fishing, try and select a soft bait that looks similar to an anchovy, and that will increase your chances of the fish going for your soft bait. But at the same time, don't be afraid to try new things on the water. Try new soft baits, try new lures. If you're fishing with baits, try different cuts, try putting them on the hook differently. Anything to entice the bite will help increase your hookup rate. Alright, tip number four is persistence. So now that you've got an idea of where you're going to fish, you've fine-tuned what the terrain is like in the area, and you've figured out the style of fishing that you're going to attempt on the water, tip number four is persistence. Now, we're quite lucky in a way, being in a kayak, that it's more difficult to move around spots if you're not getting bites, and that can often be a good thing, because often the fish will be there but they're just not biting. So having that persistence and sticking it out can often be a good thing, and you'll find that for maybe an hour or two you're not getting anything, and then all of a sudden the fish are on. So once you're there, go out, stick to your plan and be persistent. Tip number five. So tip number five kind of ties in with number four in being persistent. Tip number four kind of relates to being persistent while you're on the water and not paddling around all day trying to find the fish, but rather waiting for the fish to come on the bite. Tip number five, be persistent in the area that you're fishing in the long term. So if you go out fishing one day and you don't catch anything, doesn't mean you necessarily need to find a completely new spot or new area to fish. The more you fish a local area, the better you'll start to understand it, and you'll figure out where fish are holding, when they're biting, when they're not biting, what tides are good for the area, and things like that. So the more you can fish an area over weeks, months, or even years, the more that you'll have an understanding of where to find the fish and how to target them. So one thing I like to do on my sounder is whenever I hook a good fish, I'll put a mark on the sounder wherever I hooked it, and you'll find that if you fish the same area over weeks or months or years, you'll quite often find that whenever you put those marks in, after a while you might find that there's an area where you've got multiple marks that are pretty close together, and that's a pretty good indication that, you know, there's potentially good fish holding there. So the spot where I'm fishing now, I've fished on and off for a couple of years, and I've got 1 or 2 spots where I've got multiple marks where I've hooked good fish over the time, and so that's where I head straight away when I come out now, and generally I do catch fish there. So that's a good tip when you're out on the water. Right, my final tip for this video is to just be safe on the water. Doesn't matter how many fish you catch, how many fish you don't catch, but if you're not safe on the water and you don't make it back in, then you can't go fishing again, can you? So safety is #1 consideration whenever you go out on the water. Make sure someone knows where you're going, when you plan on being back on the water. Make sure you've got 2 forms of waterproof communication with you at all times. Make sure you've got a PFD or a life jacket on you, and make sure that you're actually comfortable in the water should you find yourself in there one day. Obviously no one ever plans to be in the water, but it can happen quicker than you think it can. So yeah, make sure you are comfortable in the water and that you can get yourself back onto your kayak if you do find yourself in the water. As much as safety can be a boring topic to talk about, let's face it, it's the most important thing. And the first thing that I do whenever I get a new kayak, I take it out on the water with no gear. I get dressed up in what I would normally go fishing in. I'll paddle out and I'll flip the kayak, I'll jump in the water, and I'll make sure that I'm able to flip the kayak upright by myself and get back into the kayak by myself should I ever find myself in that situation. I know when you get a new kayak, all you want to do is just go fishing, but honestly it'll take you 10 minutes, paddle out a little bit, flip the kayak, upright it, jump back in, make sure you're comfortable doing that, go back to shore, get changed, put all your gear on the kayak, and you're away. Like I say, safety's paramount. We want to be out fishing as much as we can, so if we can do it safely, then that gives us more opportunities to come back out and do it again. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you took away some useful information from it. If you've got any questions, please leave a comment below and I will definitely reply to you. If you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button, help us out. Let us know what other content you want to see. As I mentioned in my last video, I'd like to start making more content on how to kayak fish and little tips and tricks rather than just catching fish. And you know, as much as it's nice to watch fish being caught, it's also nice to learn how to fish so that you can go out there and do it yourself. So if you've got any suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. See you later.